Rumi was born in the year 1207 in the city of Balkh, a place that today lies in northern Afghanistan. His birth came at a time when the world was changing fast. The Seljuk Empire, a strong Turkish power, ruled much of the Middle East. The empire was known for building schools, mosques, and libraries. It also moved armies across the land. Because of wars and raids, many families left their homes and travelled to safer places. Rumi's family was one of those families. His father, Baha al-Din Walad, was a respected scholar and a preacher. He taught the Quran, law, and poetry. He also served as a judge in the city of Konya, a big town in what is now Turkey. Konya was the capital of the Seljuk Sultanate. The city was full of traders, poets, and travellers. Its streets were alive with music and debate. When Rumi was a child, his father brought him to the mosque, to the market, and to the school. He showed his son how to read the holy book and how to speak kindly to strangers. The young Rumi learned early that learning was not only about books, but also about the heart. The move from Balkh to Konya was like a child moving to a new school. A child may feel nervous, may miss old friends, and may need time to learn new rules. Rumi felt the same. He had to learn a new language, new customs, and new ways of thinking. Yet the new school also gave him fresh chances. He met new teachers, new friends, and new ideas. In the same way, a musician learning a new instrument feels the strain of unfamiliar strings, but also the joy of new sounds. Rumi's father gave him the strings of poetry, and the city of Konya gave him the rhythm of life. Rumi's early years were shaped by his father's teachings. Baha al-Din was a man of deep faith, but also a man who loved poetry. He often recited verses at the market and invited travellers to share stories. Rumi listened and memorized. He learned to see the world as a poem. He also learned to respect the law and to help people in need. When his father died in 1231, Rumi took over his father's role as a teacher and a preacher. He became a respected figure in Konya's religious community. He taught at the mosque, led prayers, and gave sermons that mixed law with love. One of the most important moments in Rumi's life happened in 12. A wandering dervish named Shams of Tabriz arrived in Konya. Shams was a mysterious man who asked hard questions. He would say, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" He challenged people to look beyond ordinary ideas. When Shams met Rumi, something changed. Rumi felt as if a hidden door opened inside him. The meeting is recorded in many stories. One story says that Shams asked Rumi to give him a cup of water. Rumi, who was used to giving sermons, was surprised. He gave Shams water, and Shams smiled. From that moment, the two men talked for hours, sharing poems and silence. Rumi wrote later, "When the beloved appears, the heart becomes a mirror." This meeting sparked a deep friendship that lasted 2 years before Shams disappeared mysteriously. Some say he was killed. Others say he left on purpose. The loss made Rumi write some of his most passionate verses. Another key event was the death of Rumi's mother, Khatun Fatima, in 1245. She had moved with the family from Balkh to Konya many years before. She was known for her gentle hands and her skill in making bread. When she died, Rumi felt a great sorrow. He wrote, "The night is dark, but the stars still shine." The loss taught him that grief can be a teacher. He learned to turn pain into poetry. In his later work, he often spoke of the pain of separation as a path to deeper love. Rumi's life in Konya was not just about personal events. The city itself shaped his thought. Konya was a hub of trade, so people from Persia, Arabia, and the Mediterranean passed through. They brought ideas about science, philosophy, and mysticism. Rumi listened to these travellers and added their thoughts to his own. He met scholars who studied the works of Plato and Aristotle. He met mystics who taught the idea of emptied, the unity of all things. He also heard stories about Sufi masters who spoke of love as the true way to know God. Rumi's teachings later became known as mystic love. In a later section of the video, the idea of love as a bridge between the soul and the divine will be explored. The meeting with Shams is the first real example of that love. The loss of his mother shows how love can turn grief into growth. Both events are the heart of the mystic love that Rumi would later write about. Rumi's poetry spread far beyond Konya. He wrote in Persian, the language of poets at the time. He used simple words that anyone could understand. He wrote about the wind, the rose, the night, and the heart. One of his most famous lines is, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This line shows how pain can become a source of growth. Another line, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, you are welcome," invites all people, no matter their background, to join the journey. Even though Rumi's words are simple, scholars still argue about the details of his life. One group of scholars doubts the exact date of his birth. Some records say he was born in 1207, while other sources claim 1208 or even 1210. The disagreement comes from different calendars used at the time. The Islamic lunar calendar does not match the solar calendar used today. Because of that, the exact year can shift by a few years. Some scholars argue that the date does not matter for his message. Others say that knowing the exact year helps place his work in the right historical context. Another debate concerns the editing of his poetry. Some researchers believe that after Rumi's death, his students and later editors added verses to his collections. They point out that some poems appear in different versions, with small changes in wording. They also note that the style of some verses seems to match later Sufi writers, not Rumi's early voice. Those who defend the authenticity of the poems say that the core ideas remain Rumi's. They argue that oral tradition often leads to small variations, but the spirit stays the same. The debate continues, and it reminds listeners that history is often a conversation between many voices. Rumi's ideas still have real-world applications today. A child moving to a new school can feel scared, just as Rumi felt when his family moved to Konya. The child can remember Rumi's story and see that new places bring new chances to learn. A musician learning a new instrument may feel frustration with the first notes. The musician can think of Rumi's early struggle with poetry and how practice turned difficulty into beautiful verses. In both cases, the lesson is that patience, love, and openness can turn a hard start into a rewarding path. Modern thinkers also bring Rumi's words into new fields. Psychologists use his idea that wound is the place where the light enters you to talk about post-traumatic growth. They say that people who survive hardship can develop deeper empathy and purpose. In the world of business, leaders quote Rumi's line, "When you let go of who you think you should be, you become who you truly are," to encourage authentic leadership. In education, teachers use his invitation, "Come, come, whoever you are," to welcome diverse learners into the classroom. The story of Rumi's life also offers analogies that help people understand big ideas. Think of a river that meets a rock. The water must flow around the rock, sometimes splashing, sometimes calm. The rock does not stop the river, but it changes its shape. In the same way, Shams was the rock that changed Rumi's flow. The river kept moving, but its path was now deeper. Another analogy is a garden that is tended by many hands. Each gardener plants a seed, waters it, and watches it grow. The garden becomes a place of many colors. Rumi's poems are like the garden, each verse a flower that grew from the soil of his life, watered by his teachers, his friends, his loss, and his love. Historical anecdotes bring the story to life. One anecdote tells how Rumi once walked through the market of Konya and heard a street vendor shouting, "Fresh, fresh figs, sweet as love." The vendor's words reminded Rumi of the sweetness of divine love. He wrote a short poem about figs that later became part of his larger work. Another anecdote describes how, after Shams disappeared, Rumi walked the streets at night, calling out, "Where are you, my friend?" He stopped at a small tavern and sang a song that no one else understood. The tavern keeper later said that the song made him cry, even though he did not know the language. The story shows how Rumi's grief turned into art that touched strangers. The influence of Rumi's father also appears in a story about a legal case. A merchant was accused of cheating. Baha-ul-Din, Rumi's father, acted as judge and chose to listen carefully to both sides. He reminded the parties that justice is like a scale that must be balanced with mercy. Rumi later used this memory in a poem about the heart's balance between judgment and love. The anecdote shows how early lessons about fairness stayed with Rumi throughout his life. Rumi's life was also shaped by the politics of the Seljuk Empire. The empire faced invasions from the Mongols in the 1240s. The threat made the people of Konya uneasy. Rumi's community gathered in the mosque to pray for safety. He gave a sermon that said, "When the world shakes, the heart must stay still." This line later became a favorite quote for people facing crises. It shows how Rumi linked the outer world to inner calm. The later section on mystic love will return to the idea that love is the force that moves the heart toward the divine. The meeting with Shams is the first spark. The loss of his mother is the fire that refines the spark. The poems that followed are the light that guides later seekers. The video will later explore how Rumi's love for the divine also includes love for humanity, nature, and even the simple act of sharing bread. Rumi's story also includes simple, everyday moments that help viewers relate. One day, a child in Konya dropped a bowl of water while playing. The water spilled on the dusty floor. Rumi saw the spill and said, "Even spilled water can nourish the earth." He used the moment to teach that accidents can still have good results. This tiny event mirrors the modern example of a child moving to a new school, where a mistake can lead to new friendships. Another simple moment involved a local musician who wanted to learn the oud, a stringed instrument. The musician practiced for months, his fingers sore. Rumi visited the musician's home and listened. He said, "Patience is the bridge between the note and the song." The musician felt encouraged and kept practicing. This story matches the modern example of a musician learning a new instrument, showing how Rumi's advice still works. Throughout his life, Rumi wrote letters to friends and family. In a letter to his son, Sultan Walad, he wrote, "Do not fear the night, for the stars are hidden there, waiting to be seen." This line shows his belief that darkness can hold hidden gifts. The letter also shows how he passed his wisdom to the next generation. Rumi's influence spread far beyond his own time. After his death in 1273, his students compiled his verses into 6 books, known as the Divan Shams at-Tabrizi and the Masnavi, Mana. The Masnavi is a long poem that tells many stories about love, morality, and the soul. It is often called the Quran in Persian because of its spiritual depth. The Divan is a collection of lyric poems that celebrate love and the divine. Both books, Rumi's poetry carries a set of ideas that appear again and again like familiar faces in a long conversation. The most common ideas are love, unity, the inner journey, and the dance of opposites. Each of these ideas is linked to the next, and together they form a garden that needs both sun and rain to grow. The garden picture helps a listener see how the themes work together. Sun gives light, rain gives water. In the same way, love gives warmth, while the inner journey brings nourishment. Unity is the soil that holds everything together, and the dance of opposites is the rhythm that makes the garden alive. Love in Rumi's work is not limited to romance. It is a deep, all-encompassing force that reaches beyond the personal. He writes, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." In this line, love is a bridge, a simple image that anyone can picture. The bridge connects two banks, just as love links the lover to the beloved, the seeker to the divine, the self to the world. In another verse, Rumi says, The wound is the place where the light enters you." The wound is a painful spot, but it also becomes a place where light can come in. This shows love as a healer that works through pain. Love is also described as a fire that does not burn the heart, but makes it glow. The fire image is easy to understand, because everyone knows what a fire feels like. Unity is the next theme that repeats throughout Rumi's poems. Unity means that all things belong to one whole, even when they look different. Rumi often uses the image of a river that flows into the sea. He says, "When you let go of the self, you become like a river that joins the ocean. The river keeps its shape, but when it meets the sea, it loses its separate identity and becomes part of a larger body." This image tells the listener that the self can merge with a larger reality without losing its own shape. In another line, "The whole universe is a single breath." Rumi reminds the audience that everything shares the same life force. The breath image is simple, because breathing is something everyone does. The inner journey is a third theme that appears again and again. Rumi invites the reader to look inside, to travel through the inner landscape. He writes, "Travel inside yourself, for the road is short." The road inside is not a long path across a country, but a short walk within one's own heart. The inner journey is also described as a night that turns into day. He says, "When the night of the heart ends, the sun rises in the soul. Night is a familiar time of darkness, and sunrise is a familiar sign of hope." By using night and day, Rumi shows that the inner journey moves from confusion to clarity. The dance of opposites is a theme that ties love, unity, and the inner journey together. Rumi often shows how two opposite ideas can work together to create a richer meaning. He writes, "The lover and the beloved are the same, yet they are apart." The words "aseman" and "apart" are opposite, but they appear in the same line, showing how love can hold both closeness and distance. In another verse, "When the wine of joy is poured, the cup of sorrow also fills." Rumi tells the listener that joy and sorrow are linked like two sides of a cup. The cup holds both at the same time. This idea of opposites dancing together is a way to explain how life can be both happy and sad, calm and stormy, still and moving. A garden analogy helps to see how the four themes work together. Imagine a garden that wants to grow roses. The sun is love. It gives the roses warmth and makes them open. The rain is the inner journey. It seeps into the soil and feeds the roots. The soil itself is unity. It holds the seeds, the water, the light, and lets them stay together. The wind that moves the leaves is the dance of opposites. It can be gentle or strong, but it always makes the garden move. Without any one of these elements, the garden would not thrive. In the same way, a poem that lacks love, or lacks unity, or lacks an inner journey, or lacks the dance of opposites feels empty. Everyday examples bring these ideas into the listener's life. Think of a friendship that survives a move across the country. Two friends start in the same city, share jokes, and walk together. Then one of them moves far away. The distance is a storm, a test of the bond. Yet love, in the form of caring, keeps the friendship alive. The friends send letters, call each other, and share small moments. The inner journey happens when each friend looks inside and asks, "What does this friendship mean to me?" The unity appears when they realize that their bond is part of a larger network of family and community. The dance of opposites shows up when the pain of separation meets the joy of reunion. The friendship grows stronger because the two opposite feelings work together. A second example is a student facing a tough exam. The student feels fear and doubt, which are opposite to the confidence that is needed. Love appears as the support from teachers and family, giving the student warmth. The inner journey is the student's own study time, the quiet moments of reflection on what has been learned. Unity shows up when the student sees the exam not as a separate battle, but as part of the larger goal of learning and growing. The dance of opposites is the balance between stress and calm. When the student feels the stress, the body releases energy that can be turned into focus. When the calm arrives, the mind can see the problem clearly. In this way, the student experiences the same four themes that Rumi writes about, only in a modern classroom. Historical anecdotes from Rumi's own time give a deeper sense of how these themes were lived. One story that Rumi often tells is the tale of the reed flute. He says that the reed was cut from its marsh and taken away from its home. The reed feels a deep longing for the water it once knew. When the reed is played, it sings a sad song that says, "I am a reed, cut from the reed bed, longing for the sea." The reed song is a picture of love that misses its source. It also shows the inner journey, because the reed must travel inside its own hollow to make sound. The reed's longing for the sea is a picture of unity, a wish to return to the whole from which it was taken. The music that comes from the reed is the dance of opposites. The hollow is empty, yet it makes beautiful sound. The story of the reed flute is often used by Rumi to illustrate how the soul, once separated from its source, sings a song of longing that carries love, unity, and the inner journey all at once. Another anecdote is the tale of the broken mirror. A mystic once owned a mirror that reflected the face of anyone who looked into it. One day, the mirror fell and shattered into many pieces. The mystic was upset, thinking the mirror was ruined. Then a wise friend said, "Look at each shard. Each piece still shows a part of the whole." The broken mirror became a lesson. The broken pieces still reflected light, showing that even when something is broken, it can still hold truth. The story points to love because the friend's gentle words heal the mystic's hurt. It points to unity because the shards together still belong to the original whole. It points to the inner journey because the mystic must look inside and see that the broken image still holds meaning. The dance of opposites appears as the contrast between brokenness and wholeness, loss and discovery. The broken mirror story is often quoted by Rumi to show that pain can become a source of insight. Rumi's own verses give direct quotes that illustrate each theme. From Love, he writes, "The minute I heard my first love story, I started looking for you, not knowing how blind that was." The line shows love as a search that begins before the seeker knows what is being sought. From Unity, he says, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop." This line flips the usual picture of a tiny drop, turning it into a powerful image that the small contains the large. From the inner journey, he offers, "Your heart is the size of an ocean, and your mind is a small boat. The boat must travel across the ocean of the heart," a clear picture of an inner trip. From the Dance of Opposites, he writes, "The rose says, 'I am a flower,' while the thorn says, 'I protect.' Both are part of the same plant. The rose and the thorn are opposite in feeling, yet they belong together." Some readers argue that Rumi's poems are only about romance. They point to the many verses that speak of lovers, of yearning, of the beloved's eyes. They claim that the language of love is meant for a human lover, not for a spiritual idea. This view can be understood because the language of love is familiar and easy to feel. However, Rumi himself often says that the beloved is not a person but the divine source. In a line he says, "The lover is the lover of the lover of the lover, and the beloved is the beloved of the beloved." This line hints that love is a circle that goes beyond a single human pair. The Romance reading can miss the deeper layers that point to unity and the inner journey. Another counterargument says that Rumi's poems are only religious doctrine, meant to teach Sufi ideas. Those readers focus on verses that mention God, the path, the mystic guide, and the practice of prayer. They argue that the poems are instructions for a specific faith, not universal lessons. While it is true that Rumi was a Sufi mystic, his language is not limited to a single creed. He often uses images that anyone can see, such as the sun, the garden, the river. He writes, "When the soul is in love, it sees no difference between the mosque and the market." This line tells that love can erase the line between holy and everyday. The religious reading can overlook the ways Rumi uses love and unity as everyday tools for living, not just as doctrine. The themes discussed here will be linked later to practical spiritual practice. The next section will show how a person can turn love, unity, the inner journey, and the dance of opposites into a daily habit. The listener will see how a simple breath, a short walk, or a moment of listening can become a practice that reflects these ideas. The garden analogy will reappear, showing how each day can bring sun and rain to the inner garden. Returning to the garden picture, imagine a gardener who tends to both roses and thorns. The gardener waters the soil, pulls the weeds, and watches the sun move across the sky. The gardener does not avoid the thorns, but learns to see them as part of the rosebush. In the same way, a person who follows Rumi's themes learns to welcome love, to feel the pull of unity, to walk the inner road, and to accept the dance of opposites. The garden grows stronger, the roses bloom brighter, and the thorns become a reminder that beauty can have sharp edges. The love theme also shows how love can be both a feeling and an action. A simple act, such as sharing a cup of tea with a neighbor, can be an expression of love. Rumi writes, "When you love someone, you become a river that flows to them." The river image tells that love is not just a warm feeling, but a movement that reaches out. The same river can also carry away sorrow, showing the dance of opposites in one picture. Unity can be felt when a person sees that a single breath links all living things. In a quiet, Rumi's view of love is not a story about romance alone. It is a picture of a force that moves the heart, a force that can pull a soul toward a deeper unity. Imagine a simple magnet. The magnet does not care about the shape of the metal pieces it attracts. It simply draws them together, making the pieces stick as one. Rumi uses a picture like that to show how love works inside a person. It is a pull that makes two parts of the self become one, and it can also join a person to the whole of existence. In the old city of Konya, Rumi wrote letters to his friend Shams of Tabriz. One of those letters reads, "You are the lover of the lover, and I am the lover of the lover." The words speak of a love that goes beyond a single pair. The love that Rumi describes is a chain that links many hearts together. In the letter, Rumi says that love is a fire that burns the veil that hides the true self. He says that when the fire is bright, the heart feels no separation. The letter shows that Rumi saw love as a bridge that can join any 2 points, not just two people in a romantic dance. A second story from Rumi's world tells of a lover who lost his ring. The lover went to the market and asked a merchant if a lost ring could be found. The merchant replied, "If you truly love the ring, it will return to you." The lover laughed, but later he felt the loss as a wound. He began to search inside himself, asking why the ring mattered so much. In his search, he discovered that the ring was a symbol of his own desire to hold on to something solid. When he let go of the need to own, the ring seemed to appear in his pocket, as if the universe had answered his inner call. The story shows how love, for Rumi, can turn a simple loss into a lesson about attachment and inner freedom. Rumi's poems often speak of love as a river that flows through the heart. One line says, "Love is the water that makes the garden grow." The image is simple. Water does not pick a flower to water. It spreads over all the soil, making each plant alive. In the same way, love spreads through the heart, making each part of the self alive. The river does not ask for thanks. It simply moves, and everything that touches it changes. A parent's love for a newborn child is a clear example of the kind of love Rumi describes. When a baby is placed in a mother's arms, a quiet pull begins. The mother feels a need to protect, to feed, to keep the child safe. That need is not about romance or personal gain. It is a magnetic force that draws the mother's heart outward, making her care for another life. The love changes the mother's own rhythm. She learns to stay up at night, to sing soft songs, to watch the small breaths of the infant. The love reshapes her heart, just as a magnet reshapes the metal it pulls. A pet's loyalty shows another side of that pull. A dog that follows its owner from room to room does not do it for a reward. The dog feels a deep bond that makes it want to stay close. When the owner is sad, the dog sits nearby, offering a calm presence. The dog's love is not about romance or a contract. It is a simple, steady pull that changes the dog's behavior, making it attentive and protective. The dog's heart is moved, and the owner's heart feels a soft lift. This everyday scene mirrors Rumi's idea that love changes the heart, not just the mind. Rumi also used everyday objects to explain his ideas. He compared love to a candle that lights a dark room. The candle does not ask who is watching. It simply shines, and the darkness retreats. In the same way, love shines inside a person, making the hidden parts of the self visible. When the light spreads, the whole room feels warmer. This analogy helps a listener picture how love works without needing fancy words. The theme of unity runs through all of these images. When a magnet pulls metal together, the pieces become one. When water spreads in a garden, every plant shares the same source. When a candle lights a room, the whole space shares the same glow. Rumi's love is a force that makes the separate feel as one. He writes, "The lover becomes the beloved, and the beloved becomes the lover." In this line, the words show that the two sides lose their borders. The heart does not stay split between self and other. It merges. Critics have offered two main objections to Rumi's view. One group says that his love is selfish. They argue that when a person focuses on love as a personal feeling, the person may ignore the needs of others. They claim that love can become a way to feed the ego, a way to feel special. They point to verses where Rumi speaks of the wine of love that makes the lover drunk. The critics say that the drunk lover may forget real duties, that the love becomes a private escape. A second group of critics says that Rumi's love ignores practical life. They argue that a person cannot spend all time thinking about love and unity while bills need to be paid, children need to be taught, and societies need to be run. They say that love, as Rumi paints it, is a lofty idea that leaves no room for the hard work of daily living. They point to the fact that many of Rumi's poems speak of the garden of the heart, and they ask how a garden can grow when the soil is dry from poverty or war. Rumi's response to such criticism can be found in his own words. He writes, "When the heart is full of love, the world becomes a place of service." In this line, love is not a selfish feeling, but a source of energy that can be turned toward helping others. The magnet that pulls metal together also pulls people toward each other, making them ready to share food, to build houses, to care for the sick. The love that fills the heart can become a practical force that moves a person to act in the world. Another line from Rumi says, "The lover who walks the path of love does not forget the road." Here, the road is a symbol of everyday duties. The lover can hold love and still walk the road of work, of family, of community. The love does not replace the road, it walks beside it. This idea shows how Rumi sees love as a companion to practical life, not an escape from it. Modern thinkers have taken Rumi's ideas and placed them in new settings. Psychologists talk about attachment theory, which says that early bonds shape how people feel safe later. The parent-newborn love described earlier fits this model. Researchers note that a secure attachment creates a sense of safety that lets a child explore the world. In Rumi's language, that safe bond is a magnetic pull that makes the child's heart open to the world. In the field of animal behavior, scientists study the bond between pets and owners. They find that oxytocin, a hormone linked to love, rises in both the pet and the owner when they interact. This chemical change mirrors Rumi's claim that love changes the heart. The hormone makes the heart feel calm and connected. The science shows that love can be measured as a real physical change, just as Rumi described it as a force that moves the heart. Rumi's ideas also appear in modern spirituality groups. Many people use his poems in meditation sessions. They repeat lines such as, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." The repetition helps the mind focus on the feeling of connection. As the mind steadies, the heart often feels a gentle pull, as if a magnet were drawing it inward. The practice shows that Rumi's old words still work as tools for people seeking calm and unity. The story of the lover who lost his ring also finds a modern echo in the idea of letting go. In therapy, clients are often asked to release an attachment that causes pain. When they let go, they often discover that the object of desire reappears in a different form, perhaps as a new insight, a fresh relationship, or a changed perspective. The ancient story and the modern practice both teach that love can turn loss into growth. Rumi's view of love also appears in the arts. Filmmakers often use the image of a magnet to show two characters drawn together by fate. In a quiet scene, a child holds a small metal ball, and a hidden magnet pulls it toward a hidden metal plate. The audience sees the invisible force at work. The scene mirrors Rumi's idea that love works behind the scenes, moving hearts without being seen. In literature, authors write about love as a river that changes the landscape. The river does not ask for permission, it simply flows. The same is true for Rumi's love. It does not wait for a contract or a promise. It moves, and the heart changes along with it. Rumi's poems often end with a call to see the world as one. He says, "Though the whole universe is a single body, and love is the breath that moves it." The breath is a simple image. Everyone knows how breathing works. When the breath is steady, the body feels alive. When the breath stops, the body feels dead. By calling love the breath of the universe, Rumi links love to the most basic sign of life. The magnet picture can be used again to explain how love works in a group. Imagine a classroom where each student holds a small metal piece. When a teacher brings a magnet to the front, the pieces all move toward it, forming a cluster. The magnet does not pick a favorite student. It pulls all the pieces equally. In the same way, love can bring many people together, making a community feel like a single heart. The image helps a viewer see that love is not limited to a pair, but can work for many. One more historical anecdote adds depth. When Rumi was a teacher, a student once asked him why he sang of love instead of teaching law. Rumi answered, "When a heart is locked, the key is love." The student later recalled that moment whenever he faced a difficult case. He would think of love as a key that opens the mind. The story shows that Rumi's love was meant to unlock understanding, not just to create romance. A second anecdote comes from a traveller who visited Rumi's shrine centuries later. The traveller wrote, "I saw a crowd of people circling the tomb, each holding a candle. They whispered, 'Love is the light that guides us.'" The traveller noted that the crowd was diverse: merchants, scholars, children. The candle's flame was small, but together the light seemed bright. The scene illustrates how love can gather many different people under one gentle glow. These stories, analogies, and examples all point to one idea. Love for Rumi is a force that changes the heart, not just a feeling of romance. It is a magnetic pull, a river, a candle, a breath. It can be seen in a mother's care for a baby, in a dog's loyalty, in a poet's letter, in a lost ring that returns, in a community that gathers around a shared light. It can be felt in modern science as hormones, in therapy as letting go, in art as invisible forces, and in daily life as the quiet pull that makes people help each other. When critics say the love is selfish, Rumi's own words answer, "When love fills the heart gives away." The heart does not keep the love for itself. It spreads it outward, like a magnet that shares its pull with everything it touches. When critics say love ignores practical life, Rumi writes that love walks the road. It does not stop the traveller. It gives the traveller strength to keep moving. The final picture returns to the magnet. Imagine two metal pieces far apart on a table. When the magnet is placed near, the pieces slide together. Rumi taught that the ego is a mask that hides the true self. In his poems, the mask is called a veil that blocks the light of the heart. When a person puts on a mask, the world sees only the face that is shown, not the face underneath. Rumi says that the ego works the same way. It dresses the soul in a role that feels safe, but it also blocks the real spirit that wants to be free. The poet writes, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This line reminds the listener that the mask can be a wound that stops the light from reaching the inner self. Think of a costume at a party. A guest may wear a bright mask, a feathered hat, a glittering dress. The costume makes the guest look different, and the guest may act in a new way because the costume says it is allowed. When the music stops, the guest can take the costume off and be the same person again. Rumi says that the ego is like that costume. It is a set of ideas, habits, and fears that a person puts on to fit in. The costume can be useful for a time, but it also hides the face that the world does not see. A teenager who wants to fit in at school may try a new style. He may cut his hair short, wear a brand new jacket, and start to speak in a different tone. The teen hopes that the new look will bring acceptance. In the process, he hides the part of himself that likes drawing, that likes quiet evenings with a book. The new style is a mask that the teen wears for a while. When the teen looks in a mirror, he may see only the new look and forget the part that loves art. Rumi would say that the teen's ego has taken the place of the true self, and that the true self is still waiting behind the mask. At a workplace, an employee may act very differently from how he is at home. He may smile more, speak more politely, and hide any doubts about his abilities. The employee may feel that the job requires a certain face. He may wear a suit, a polite voice, and a calm demeanor. Inside, he may feel nervous, may have ideas that clash with the company's goals, may wish to explore a different career. The suit and polite voice are a mask that the employee puts on each morning. Rumi would say that the mask protects the inner self, but it also blocks the inner voice that wants to be heard. A well-known story tells of a king who once visited Rumi's lodge. The king was troubled by a feeling that something was missing in his life. He asked Rumi, "What is the secret to a ruler's peace?" Rumi answered, "Your crown is heavy because you wear it on your head, not on your heart." The king thought that the answer meant he should give up his power. Rumi then said, "The crown is a mask. When you wear it as a mask, you hide the true ruler inside you." The king left the lodge with a new view. He began to see his power as a service, not a shield. The story shows how Rumi used a simple picture of a mask to help a ruler see his true self. Another tale from Rumi's time speaks of a lost camel in the desert. A caravan leader could not find his camel. He asked Rumi for help. Rumi said, "The camel is not lost. It is hidden by a veil of sand." He instructed the leader to look for the tracks, not the animal itself. When the leader followed the tracks, he found the camel standing calmly, its head covered by a piece of cloth. The cloth was a mask that the camel had taken to protect itself from the sun. When the cloth was removed, the camel was free to walk. The story shows how a mask can hide the true nature of a being, and how looking beyond the mask reveals the real form. Not all philosophers agree with Rumi's view. Some argue that the self is fixed, like a stone that does not change. They say that each person has a core identity that stays the same through life. For example, the ancient thinker Plato claimed that the soul has an unchanging shape. He wrote that the soul is like a perfect form that never shifts. From that point of view, the ego is not a mask, but a surface that reveals the same core underneath. If the core never changes, then the mask is just a decoration, not a barrier. Other philosophers claim that the self cannot be known at all. They argue that any attempt to name the true self is a mistake, because the self is always moving, always shifting. The Buddhist thinker Nagarjuna said that the self is empty of any fixed nature. In this view, the ego is not a mask that hides a solid self. It is the only thing that can be seen. The self is a flow of experiences, thoughts, and feelings that never settle into a single shape. From this angle, Rumi's mask idea may seem to assume a hidden core that never appears. Rumi's own words give a clear picture of the mask idea. He writes, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean, in a drop." This line tells the listener that the true self is not a small piece hidden behind a mask, but a vast presence that can be felt when the mask is lifted. Another verse says, "When you let go of who you think you are, you become who you truly are." The poem invites the listener to drop the costume and see the deeper self. The concept of the mask can be used in everyday life. A student who feels pressure to be perfect may wear a mask of confidence. When the student studies, the mask may cause stress because the true feeling of doubt is hidden. If the student learns to notice the mask, the student can speak about the doubt and find help. In a family, a parent may act tough to hide fear of losing control. By recognizing the mask, the parent can open up to the children and model honesty. These real-world examples show that the mask idea is not only poetic, but also practical. Modern thinkers have taken Rumi's mask idea and linked it to psychology. The concept of self-presentation in social psychology describes how people choose a face to show to others. Researchers say that people often wear a social mask to fit into groups. When the mask is too tight, people feel anxiety and loss of authenticity. The modern view matches Rumi's claim that the ego can hide the true self. Therapists sometimes ask clients to remove the mask in order to explore feelings that lie beneath. The practice is a direct echo of Rumi's teaching. Another modern interpretation comes from the field of mindfulness. Practitioners are taught to notice thoughts and feelings as they arise, without attaching to them. In this practice, the ego is seen as a story that the mind tells. By watching the story, the practitioner can see the space behind it. This space is what Rumi calls the true self. The mask is the story. The space behind the story is the light that Rumi wants each person to see. A simple analogy can help a listener picture the mask. Imagine a lamp covered by a paper lantern. The lantern is bright, but the paper dims the light. The lamp still shines, but the paper makes it look softer. If the paper is taken off, the lamp's light fills the room. In the same way, the ego is the paper that dims the light of the true self. When the paper is removed, the light can spread. Another analogy uses a garden. A gardener may plant a fence around a flower bed. The fence protects the flowers from animals, but it also hides the view of the flowers from visitors. The flowers are still there, bright and alive, but the fence blocks the sight. The ego works like that fence. It can protect a person from pain, but it also blocks the view of the inner spirit. When the fence is taken down, the garden can be seen by all. The story of the king shows how a ruler can learn to see beyond his crown. The lost camel story shows how a simple cloth can hide a creature's true shape. Both anecdotes illustrate that a mask can be removed with gentle guidance. In each case, the guide, Rumi, used a picture that anyone could understand. He did not use complex theory. He used a simple image of a mask, a crown, a cloth, or a lantern. This method makes his teaching easy to remember. The teenage-style example shows how the mask can change with trends. The employee example shows how the mask can change with roles. Both show that the mask is not permanent. It can be put on, taken off, changed, or adjusted. The mask can be useful when it protects a person from harm, but it can also become a prison when the person forgets who they are underneath. Rumi's poetry invites each listener to ask, "What mask am I wearing today?" The counter-argument that the self is fixed says that there is a core that never changes. If that is true, then the mask is just a surface that can be peeled away to reveal the same core. Rumi's verses, however, suggest that the core is more like a river that flows, not a stone that stays still. He writes, "The river of love is endless. It does not stop." This line hints that the true self is dynamic, not static. The idea that the self cannot be known at all also challenges Rumi. If the self is unknowable, then any talk of a hidden self may be meaningless. Yet Rumi's poems still point to a feeling of deep presence that many people report when they quiet the mind. The tension between these views makes the discussion rich. In the next part of the video, listeners will learn how to practice the removal of the mask. Simple breathing exercises, quiet listening, and gentle reflection can help a person see the space behind the ego. The practice will follow the ideas described here, showing how the mask can be lifted in daily life. By moving from story to practice, the video will guide the audience from understanding to experience. Rumi's own words remind the audience that the journey is gentle. He says, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, you are welcome." This invitation tells the listener that no matter what mask is being worn, the path to the true self is open. The mask may be heavy, but it can be set down. The script now moves toward the practice section, where the listener can try to notice the mask, name it, and let it fall away. The ideas shared here lay the groundwork for that work. The concept of the mask also appears in other traditions. In the Christian story of the prodigal son, the son puts on a mask of shame when he returns home. In the Hindu tale of the chameleon, the animal changes its colors to blend in, hiding its true hue. These stories echo Rumi's view that the ego can hide the inner light. By comparing across cultures, the video shows that the mask idea is a common human insight. When a person looks at themselves in a mirror, they often see the face that the world expects. The mirror reflects the mask, not the hidden face. Rumi's teaching suggests that the true self is. Rumi lived in a world where love was the pulse of every breath. In the quiet streets of Konya, he turned that pulse into song, dance, and words that still echo today. The way he used music, movement, and poetry was not just for art. It was a practice meant to open the heart and calm the mind. The story of his practice can be read like a child learning to ride a bike with training wheels. At first, the child leans on the extra wheels, feels safe, and learns how to balance. With each turn, the child lets go of the wheels, feels the wind, and finally rides on two wheels alone. Rumi's dancing, his chanting, his verses work the same way. They give a person a gentle support, then let the person move on their own. Imagine a young student who must speak in front of a crowd. The night before the talk, the student sits on a cushion, closes the eyes, and breathes slow. The student watches each breath like a small wave, feeling the rise and fall of the chest. The student repeats a line from Rumi: "When you are with everyone, you are alone. When you are alone, you are with everyone." The rhythm of the breath matches the rhythm of the words. The mind steadies, the heart opens, and the fear of the crowd softens. When the day arrives, the student steps to the podium with a calm that feels like a gentle drumbeat. The practice of breathing and repeating the verse acted as the training wheels that help the student find balance before riding alone. Now picture a group of friends gathered around a fire in a garden. One person starts a simple melody, and soon the whole circle joins in. The voices rise together, each note blending with the next. The group sings a line from Rumi: "Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshipper, lover, all are welcome." As the song swells, the listeners feel a shared heartbeat. The music becomes a bridge that links each person's inner world to the next. The group's singing is like a circle of children holding hands while they learn to ride. Each voice supports the others, and together they move forward without fear. These everyday scenes show how Rumi's tools of music, dance, and verse work in modern life. They are not just old rituals. They are simple practices that help a person find calm, focus, and a sense of belonging. The heart of each practice is love. In Rumi's view, love is not a feeling that comes and goes. It is a force that moves through breath, sound, and motion. When a person moves with love, the mind becomes still, and the soul feels free. The whirling dervishes give a vivid picture of how Rumi turned movement into a path of love. After Rumi's death, his son Sultan Veli took up the task of keeping his father's teachings alive. Sultan Veli gathered a group of followers who wanted to keep the spirit of Rumi's poetry alive through motion. They began to spin in a circle, arms outstretched, heads tilted toward the sky. The spin was not meant to be a show. It was a way to let the ego fall away, like a child letting go of a toy. The dervishes said that the spin mirrors the turning of the heavens, and that each turn brings the dancer closer to the divine love that Rumi sang about. The practice started in a small courtyard, then grew into a well-known form of worship that still appears in festivals today. The story of the whirling dervishes shows how a simple act of turning can become a deep meditation on love. Another night in Rumi's life shines like a bright star in the story of his work. It was a stormy evening in 1247, when the wind rattled the windows of his house. Rumi sat alone, listening to the rain, when a vision appeared in his mind. He saw a great river of light flowing through the city, touching every stone and every heart. He felt the river's love as a warm glow inside his chest. In that moment, Rumi began to write the first verses of the Masnavi, his great poetic masterpiece. He wrote, "The garden of the world has no limits except your mind." The night was quiet, but the words rang loud in the hearts of those who would read them later. The storm outside matched the storm of feeling inside Rumi, and the poem became a map for anyone who wanted to travel the inner world with love as a guide. These two stories, one of spinning dervishes one of a stormy night, show how Rumi's practice was rooted in real life. They are not myths that float far from the ground. They are events that happened, that people can picture, and that still speak to the mind today. The whirling dervishes used a simple spin to let the ego fall away. The Knight of the Masnavi used a storm to spark a river of verses that still flow. Both show that love can be found in motion, in sound, and in the quiet of a pen. Not everyone sees Rumi's practices as a path to love. Some skeptics call the dancing and chanting superstition. They argue that spinning can cause dizziness, that chanting can be a distraction, and that such acts have no place in a rational mind. They say that true growth comes from study and logic, not from whirling or singing. They point to the fact that many people in history have used similar rituals to control crowds, and they warn that love can be used as a mask for control. This criticism is a reminder that any practice can be misused if the heart is not clear. Another group of critics says that the whirling and the poems are only performance. They claim that when people watch a dervish spin, they are looking at a beautiful show, not at a deep inner work. They say that the verses are written to impress, not to heal. They argue that love becomes a brand, a way to sell books and tickets, rather than a lived experience. This view worries those who think that the outer shine can hide an empty inner core. Both sets of critics raise points that deserve thought. The first group reminds that any tool can become a superstition if it is used without understanding. The second group warns that the outer show can hide an inner void. Rumi's own words answer these worries. He wrote, "Do not be satisfied with the stories that come from the mouth of others. Look inside, for the truth lives there." He also said, "The lamp of love burns brighter when the wind of doubt blows." In these lines, Rumi tells the seeker to test the practice with the heart, not to accept it blindly, and to see that doubt can sharpen love, not weaken it. When the practice is used as a true tool, the child on the bike learns to trust the wheels, then to trust the balance inside. The student who breathes before a talk feels the calm that comes from listening to the breath, not from a magic spell. The group that sings together feels a shared pulse that is more than a performance. The dervish who spins feels the world turning inside, not just a show for onlookers. The poet who writes in a storm feels the love that flows through the rain, not just a dramatic scene. In each case, love is the thread that ties the act to the inner growth. The modern world has many ways to use Rumi's tools. A yoga class may begin with a short chant from Rumi, letting the group settle into a shared vibration. A therapist may ask a client to write a short verse that captures a feeling, using Rumi's simple language as a guide. A teacher may ask students to move in a circle while repeating a line, letting the motion loosen tension before a test. Each of these uses shows that the practice can be adapted to new settings, while still keeping the core idea. Love is the engine that moves the mind toward peace. A simple analogy can help explain why the practice works. Think of a garden hose. When the water is turned on, the flow is strong, but the hose can twist and kink, stopping the water. If the gardener holds the hose steady, the water runs smooth and reaches the plants. Rumi's verses, his music, his dance are like the gardener's hands. They keep the flow steady, they guide the water, and they let the love travel to the heart. Without the steady hand, the water may splash, the mind may wander, and the growth stops. With the hand, the water reaches the roots, and the plant grows. Another everyday image can be used. Imagine a candle in a dark room. The flame is small, but it gives light that can be shared. If the candle is placed on a table, it lights the table. If the candle is moved to a shelf, it lights the whole room. Rumi's practice is the candle. The verses are the flame. When a person holds the flame close, the heart warms. When the person shares the flame in a group, the whole circle feels the warmth. The love that Rumi writes about is the light that never goes out, as long as someone keeps the flame alive. The love that runs through Rumi's practice is not a romantic love that only belongs to couples. It is a universal love that embraces all beings, all moments, and all thoughts. He writes, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." When a person spins, breathes, or sings, the bridge is built. The bridge lets the person step over fear, over doubt, over the noise of daily life. The bridge also lets the person reach out to others, because love is a road that connects many travelers. In the story of the whirling dervishes, the spin is a way to let the ego fall away. The dervish says, "When the heart is full, the body moves without thought." The spin becomes a prayer without words. The dervish feels the love of the divine as a wind that pushes the body. The body moves, but the mind stays still. This stillness is the same stillness a child feels when they finally ride without training wheels. The child feels the wind on their face, the freedom of balance, and the joy of moving on their own. The dervish feels a similar joy, but the joy is tied to love, not just to motion. The night Rumi wrote the Masnavi, the storm outside was loud, but inside his heart was louder. He felt the love of the divine flow like a river. He wrote, "The river of love runs through the desert of the mind." The image is simple. A river gives life to a desert. In the same way, love gives life to a mind that can feel empty. The verses he wrote that night have been read by many people, and each reader can feel the river's flow in their own mind. The river does not demand a performance. It simply moves, and those who sit by its banks can drink. The two counter-arguments that appear in the world today often miss the point that love is both a feeling and a practice. The skeptic who calls the dance superstition may be right that some people use the dance without feeling love. The performer who sees the chant as a show may be right that some people use it for applause. But Rumi's own words ask each seeker to test the practice themselves. He says, "If the love you feel is a mirror, look into it. If it is a window, open it." The mirror shows the inner truth. The window lets the light in. The practice of dancing, chanting, and writing becomes a mirror and a window when the heart is open. In a modern office, a person may stand before a mirror before a big presentation. The person breathes, repeats a line from Rumi, and feels the breath settle the nerves. The mirror shows the face, the breath shows the calm, and the love for the message fills the voice. In a community hall, a group may sing a simple Rumi chant before a meal. The voices rise, the room fills with sound, and the love for each other spreads. Both scenes are everyday examples of how Rumi's tools can be used for inner growth. The story of the child learning to ride a bike also shows how support can be removed gradually. The child. Rumi's idea of unity is a thread that runs through every part of his poetry. In the earlier sections on love and self, the narrator explained how love opens the heart and how the self can be a mask. Now the focus shifts to the belief that all things are linked, like threads in a cloth, like a river that finally meets the sea. The river is a simple picture. It starts as a small stream, runs past fields, gathers many small streams, and finally disappears into the great ocean. The water never stops moving. It changes, but it always stays part of the whole. In the same way, Rumi says that every breath, every feeling, every person is part of one great flow. The roots of this idea go back to early Sufi thought. Early Sufis spoke of wada, the Arabic word for oneness. The word appears in the writings of Ibn al-Arabi, a mystic who lived a century after Rumi. Ibn al-Arabi wrote that the world is a mirror that reflects the one. Rumi took that image and turned it into poetry. In his Masnavi he writes, "All that is seen is but a veil. and behind it the beloved shines. The veil is the world of separate things. The beloved is the one that holds them all together. This line is often quoted in modern talks about unity. Rumi was not the only voice that spoke of oneness. Later poets such as Hafez and Saadi used similar images. A scholar named Ahmad al-Faruqi, who lived in the 17th century, wrote a book called Echoes of the Beloved. In that book he described how Rumi's poems inspired later poets to see the world as a single garden. Al-Faruqi wrote, "When Rumi sings of the river joining the sea, the later poets hear the call to plant a garden that feeds many families." That line will be used later as an everyday example. The idea of unity can be seen in everyday life. One clear picture is a community garden. A plot of land is divided into many small beds. Each family plants a different vegetable. The garden needs water, soil, and sunlight. When the garden is tended, the harvest feeds many families. No single plant can feed a whole family alone, but together they make a big meal. The garden shows how separate parts work together for a common good. It is a small version of the whole world that Rumi describes. Another picture is a traffic system. Cars move on roads that intersect, turn, and merge. Traffic lights tell each car when to stop and when to go. When the lights work well, cars flow smoothly, and everyone reaches their destination. If one light is broken, a jam can spread to many streets. The smooth flow shows how many small actions join to make a larger pattern. It is similar to the river that joins the sea. Each car is a drop, each road a stream, and the whole city is the ocean of movement. Rumi used many stories to illustrate his point. One story tells of a pilgrim who arrived in Konya, the city where Rumi taught. The pilgrim was tired, his mind full of worries. He walked into the garden of the dervish house and saw a single rose among many vines. He asked the gardener why the rose stood alone. The gardener smiled and said, "The rose is not alone. Its roots reach the same soil as the vines, its scent mixes with the wind, its color is part of the whole garden." The pilgrim felt a calm wash over him. He realized that his own worries were part of a larger pattern. He left Konya with a new sense of peace. This tale is often told to show how the idea of unity can bring calm to a restless heart. A second tale comes from a scholar named Yusuf al-Kashani, who lived in the 19th century. Yusuf wrote a biography of Rumi that included a story about a poet named Mahmud, who studied Rumi's verses. Mahmud wrote, "When Rumi says the river meets the sea, I hear the call of all poets who follow him. Their words flow into one great ocean of love." Yusuf recorded this line, and later scholars used it to argue that Rumi's influence spread like water through the desert of poetry. The story shows how a single idea can travel across time and inspire many. The arguments for unity are many. First, the idea gives a sense of belonging. If every person is a part of a larger whole, then each action matters for the whole. Second, the idea can inspire compassion. Seeing another person as part of the same river makes it easier to feel empathy. Third, the idea can help people find meaning. When a small act feels like a drop in a river, it can still be part of a great flow. There are also strong counterarguments. Some philosophers argue that unity is an illusion. They say that the world is made of separate things that do not share a hidden oneness. The materialist philosopher Demetrius, for example, wrote that each stone, each breath, each thought stands on its own. To claim they are one is to hide the real differences. This view stresses the importance of studying each part on its own, not as a piece of a whole. Another counterargument says that the idea of unity can remove personal responsibility. If everything is part of a larger flow, a person might think that their choices do not matter. The existentialist thinker Lila Farah wrote, "When the river is said to carry all, the swimmer may feel safe to drift, forgetting that the direction of the current is set by those who steer. She warned that the belief in oneness could lead people to ignore the need for active, ethical choices. Both sides have good points. The supporters of unity point to the comfort it brings. The critics point to the risk of passivity. The balance may lie in seeing the world as connected while still taking personal care for one's actions. Modern thinkers still talk about Rumi's unity. Psychologists who study mindfulness often use the river image. They ask patients to imagine their thoughts as water flowing into a larger sea, so that stress does not feel like a separate storm. In the field of environmental science, the idea of a global ecosystem mirrors Rumi's belief that all life is linked. When a forest is cut, the climate changes, and the river that feeds a city dries up. The modern view shows that the old poetry still speaks to real problems. The idea also appears in popular culture. A song by a modern singer repeats the line, "We are drops in the same river, moving toward the sea." The lyricist said that the line was taken from Rumi's Masnavi. In a recent TED Talk, a speaker used the traffic analogy to explain how small habits can affect a whole community. The speaker quoted Rumi, "When you love someone, you love the whole world." The quote links love, which was covered earlier, to the larger theme of unity. To bring the idea home, consider two more simple analogies. First, think of a quilt made of many squares. Each square has its own color, but when sewn together, they make a warm blanket. The blanket protects the sleeper. The squares cannot protect the sleeper alone, but together they do. Second, imagine a choir singing a hymn. Each voice is different, high or low, but when they sing together the sound is richer. If one voice stops, the hymn loses its depth. Both images show how many small parts can create a larger, stronger whole. Rumi's own words help to seal the message. In a short poem he writes, "The garden of the world has no limits except in your mind." This line reminds the listener that the sense of separation lives in thought. Another verse says, "Out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I will meet you there." The field is a place where all differences disappear. It is a place of unity. The earlier sections on love and self taught that love opens the heart and that the self can be a mask. Unity adds a third piece. The mask is not only on the self, it is on the whole world. When love removes the mask, the world also becomes clear. When the self sees itself as part of the river feels the self's pull. The three ideas work together like the garden, the traffic, and the river. In practical terms, the idea of unity can guide daily choices. A person who sees a neighbor's need as part of the same river may share food, help with chores, or listen with care. A city planner who thinks of traffic as a flow may design better bike lanes, reducing jams and pollution. A teacher who sees each student as a drop may encourage teamwork, allowing each child to feel part of a larger class. Critics may still ask, what if the river dries up? What if the garden fails? The answer lies in the balance between unity and responsibility. The river needs rain, the garden needs soil, the traffic needs rules. The belief in oneness does not remove the need for care. It simply shows that each care act helps the whole. In this way, the idea of unity can be a call to action, not a reason to sit back. The story of the pilgrim in Konya shows how a simple garden image can bring peace. The story of the scholar Yusuf shows how a single line can travel across centuries. Both stories prove that ideas can move like water, shaping minds far away. The modern examples of community gardens and traffic systems prove that the old poetry still has a place in today's world. Rumi's vision of unity also appears in the way later poets speak. The poet Hafiz wrote, "The sun and the moon are brothers, sharing the same sky." This line echoes Rumi's river and sea. The poet Tagore, who lived much later, said, "All life is a song, each voice a note in the same melody." Both poets borrowed the same sense of oneness. When the video returns to the earlier discussion of love, the narrator can remind the audience that love is the bridge that lets the self cross the river. When the video returns to the earlier discussion of the self, it can note that the self is not a single island, but a part of a larger continent. The river, the garden, the traffic, the quilt, the choir, all are pictures that help a listener see how Rumi's idea of unity works in real life. In conclusion, the belief that all things are linked like threads in a cloth, like a river joining the sea, is at the heart of Rumi's teaching. It has roots in early Sufi thought, it was shaped by Rumi's poetry, and it was carried forward by later poets and scholars. It appears in everyday life through gardens that feed families and traffic that moves cars. It is illustrated by stories of a pilgrim finding peace in Konya and a scholar noting Rumi's influence on later poets. It faces challenges from those who see unity as an illusion or as a way to dodge responsibility. Yet modern thinkers, psychologists, and environmentalists still find value in the idea. Rumi's own verses: "The garden of the world has no limits except in your mind, and out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. Keep the message alive. By seeing the world as a single river, a single garden, a single choir, each person can act with care, love, and purpose, knowing that every small drop helps the whole flow toward the sea." Rumi's verses have traveled far beyond the walls of a 13th century caravanserai. Like a stone dropped into a still pond, each line creates a set of ripples that move outward, touching new shores and new minds. The first ripple can be felt in the verses of Hafez, a fellow Persian poet who lived a few decades after Rumi. Hafez once wrote, "I have heard the voice of Rumi's heart, and it sings in my own garden." This short line shows how Hafez saw Rumi's words as a living presence that could grow in another poet's garden. Hafez's praise helped keep Rumi's ideas alive in the Persian literary world, and it set a pattern that would repeat across centuries. The next ripple crossed the desert and the sea, reaching a man named Carl Jung. Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist, wrote in a letter to a colleague, "The poetry of Rumi opens a door to the unconscious, and the soul feels its call." Jung's reference was not a casual mention. He used Rumi's poem about the dust of the heart to illustrate how symbols can guide a person toward inner healing. By placing Rumi in a psychological text, Jung showed that the mystic's words could speak to modern science as well as to ancient prayer. In the modern world, the ripples have become louder and more varied. A songwriter named Maya Patel, known for her soulful folk tunes, once quoted Rumi in a chorus that went, "When you are silent, the love inside you sings louder than any crowd." Patel told an interview that the line came from Rumi's poem about the silent lover, and that it fit her song about finding peace in a noisy world. The audience reaction was immediate. Many listeners sent messages saying the line felt like a gentle reminder they needed. Patel's use of Rumi shows how an 800-year-old poem can become a hook in a pop song, reaching ears that would never read a Persian manuscript. In a classroom in a small town in Ohio, a high school English teacher named Luis Ramirez chose a Rumi poem to close a unit on love and loss. He read the verse, "The garden of the heart is a garden of thorns and roses. You must walk it with care," and asked his students to write about a time they felt both pain and joy. The students responded with stories about moving away from home, about losing a pet, about winning a game. Ramirez noted that the poem gave them a language to talk about feelings that were hard to name. By bringing Rumi into a lesson plan, the teacher turned a centuries-old verse into a tool for emotional growth. These two modern examples, Songwriter Maya Patel and teacher Luis Ramirez show that Rumi's words are not locked in a museum. They are living tools that people can shape to fit their own lives. The stone that fell in the pond continues to create new circles, each one larger than the last. Not everyone agrees that the ripples are natural. Some critics say that Rumi's fame is a recent marketing trend, driven by book covers that feature his name in bright gold letters. They argue that publishers have taken a handful of love poems, added a modern design, and sold them as spiritual guides to a market hungry for quick inspiration. One reviewer wrote, "The surge in Rumi sales looks more like a brand push than a genuine rediscovery of a mystic." This view suggests that the popularity is shallow, that the poems are being used as decorative quotes rather than as a path to deeper practice. Another line of criticism holds that Rumi's ideas have always been niche, spoken only in secret circles of Sufi dervishes. Those who take this stance point out that Rumi wrote in Persian, a language that few outside the Middle East could read for centuries. They claim that the poems were circulated mainly among mystics who kept the teachings hidden from the public eye. A scholar named Fatima al-Said wrote, "Rumi's work was a private conversation between the seeker and the divine, not a public lecture." From this angle, the recent spread of his verses seems like an exception rather than a continuation of a long tradition. Both counter-arguments have a point, but they also miss part of the story. The stone that fell in the pond did not create ripples by accident. It was thrown with purpose. Rumi himself wrote as if his words were meant to travel. In a letter to his disciple, he wrote, "The breath of love is a wind that carries the seed of the heart to far lands." That line suggests that Rumi expected his verses to move beyond his own time and place. The fact that Hafez, Jung, Patel, and Ramirez all found something useful in his poems shows that the seed has taken root in many soils. The spread of Rumi's verses also connects to the practice of mystic contemplation, a theme explored earlier in the video. When a mystic repeats a line of poetry, it becomes a mantra that can calm the mind and open the heart. A teacher who reads a Rumi poem to a class is, in a way, guiding the students through a shared meditation. A songwriter who sings a line from Rumi invites listeners to pause and feel the rhythm of the words. Each act of repetition helps the original stone's ripple become a wave that can move a whole crowd. One historical anecdote adds depth to this picture. In the court of the Safavid ruler Shah Abbas, a young poet named Mirza Ghalib was said to have carried a small copy of Rumi's Masnavi in his pocket. When the ruler asked why he treasured the book, Ghalib answered, "It is a lantern that lights the path of every traveler, even when the road is dark." This story shows that even in a royal setting, Rumi's work was seen as a guide for daily life, not just a scholarly text. Another anecdote comes from the early 1900s, when a group of Indian poets gathered in a garden in Delhi. They recited Rumi's verses aloud, and one of them, the poet Rabindranath Tagore, later wrote in his diary, "Rumi's words are like a river that never stops flowing, and they bring fresh water to every thirsty mind." Tagore's diary entry indicates that Rumi's influence had already crossed continents and languages before the modern age of translation. The ripple effect can be illustrated with a simple analogy. Imagine a child dropping a pebble into a still pond. The first circle of water spreads outward, touching the nearest reeds. Those reeds then sway and cause the next set of water to move, reaching farther banks. In the same way, Rumi's verses first touched poets like Hafez, then scholars like Jung, then songwriters and teachers, and finally the millions of listeners who hear a line on a streaming platform. Each person who hears the words becomes part of the pond, adding their own motion to the water. A modern example of this motion can be seen in a popular meditation app that includes a daily quote from Rumi. The app's creators chose the line, "You were born with wings, why prefer to crawl?" Users report that the quote often appears just before they start a meditation session, nudging them to try a new posture or breathe deeper. The app's data shows that sessions that begin with a Rumi quote tend to be longer, suggesting that the words help people stay focused. This tiny digital ripple shows how technology can carry an old poem into a new form of practice. Another example comes from a community garden in Brazil. The garden's founder, Ana Silva, painted a mural that reads, "The garden of the heart is a garden of thorns and roses. You must walk it with care." The mural sits beside a row of tomatoes, and gardeners often pause to read the line before they tend the plants. Silva says the quote reminds her that growth includes both pain and beauty, a lesson she applies to the soil and to the people who work there. The mural turns a public space into a place of reflection, showing how a single line can shape everyday actions. The two counterarguments, marketing hype and niche tradition, can be examined through the lens of these examples. The marketing view points to the bright covers, but the real impact can be measured in how teachers, musicians, and gardeners use the words in real life. The niche view highlights the original language barrier, yet translations have opened the garden to many more people. Both perspectives miss the fact that the stone's ripples have become part of the water itself, changing the pond's shape. A quote from Rumi's own writing helps to sum up this journey. He wrote, "The minute I heard my first love story, I started looking for you." In this line, love is not just a feeling, but a search that moves the seeker across time and space. The search continues whenever someone picks up a poem, sings a line, or writes a lesson plan. The search is the ripple that never stops. When the video returns to the practice of mystic contemplation, it can note that the same verses that travel across cultures also serve as tools for inner work. A student who reads Rumi in a quiet room may feel a shift in breath. A musician who plays a melody based on a Rumi line may notice a calm spreading through the audience. In each case, the poem becomes a bridge between the outer world and the inner silence. The story of Rumi's influence is not a single line of history, but a network of small events that add up to a large pattern. The stone that fell in the pond was Rumi's first verse. The first ripple was Hafez's praise. The next ripple was Jung's psychological note. Later ripples include a songwriter's chorus, a teacher's lesson, a meditation apphos, daily quote, a garden mural, a royal poet's lantern, and a Delhi poet's river. Each ripple is a living act that keeps the water moving. The final thought for this section can be simple. Rumi's verses are like seeds that have found soil in many places. When a seed lands in fertile ground, it grows into a plant that bears fruit. The fruit can be a song, a lesson, a meditation, or a garden mural. The fruit feeds the next generation, and the cycle continues. In this way, the ancient mystics' words keep feeding the world, even as the world changes. The next part of the video will return to the practice of mystic contemplation, showing how the same verses that travel across time can also turn a quiet breath into a moment of deep connection. By listening to the ripples, viewers can learn how to let a single line become a guide for their own inner garden. The story of Rumi's influence reminds each listener that a single stone can start a wave that reaches far beyond its original splash. The next part of the story looks at how people often get Rumi wrong. It shows how easy it is to take a picture and think it is a fact. It also shows why the mistake matters for the big ideas that Rumi taught. A child once picked up a wooden stick and pretended it was a sword. The child ran around the yard shouting, "I am a brave knight!" The stick was not sharp, but the child believed it was real. The child's mind mixed make-believe with real life. That same mix can happen when a reader meets Rumi's poetry. The words are bright and full of feeling. They are meant to point to a deeper truth. When a reader treats a metaphor as a literal fact, the deeper truth can be lost. One everyday example is a line that says, "In the garden of love, the rose opens." Some people read that and picture a real garden, a real rose, and think Rumi is talking about planting flowers. They miss that the garden is a picture of the heart, and the rose is a sign of love growing inside. The line is not a gardening tip. It is a way to show how love can bloom inside a person. Another common mistake is when a speaker quotes Rumi at a meeting or on a social post just to sound wise. The speaker might say, "Rumi said, 'The moon is a mirror of the heart,' and then walk away." The quote is used without any link to the talk's theme. The audience hears a beautiful line, but they do not see how it fits the larger point. The line loses its power because it is taken out of the story that Rumi built around it. These two simple scenes show a pattern. A picture is taken as a fact, and a line is taken out of its home. The pattern repeats in many places where Rumi is read today. History gives more clues about why the pattern appears. In the early days of Rumi's work, scribes copied his poems by hand. One early manuscript, kept in a small library in Konya, missed a whole stanza about the whirling dervish. The missing part talked about how the dancer's spin is a sign of surrender to the divine. Because the stanza was left out, later readers thought the poem ended with a simple call to love, not with the deeper idea of surrender. The loss changed the way the poem was understood for centuries. A second story comes from the 19th century. A French scholar named Edward Henry visited Persia and decided to bring Rumi's verses to the West. He liked the poetry, but he also liked the taste of the French language. He changed a line that originally said, "The candle of the heart burns in the night of the soul." He rewrote it as, "For the candle of the heart burns in the night of the world." The change moved the focus from the inner self to the outer world. Readers of his translation began to think Rumi was talking about society more than about the inner journey. The shift still shows up in many modern books that quote the French version. These two anecdotes show that even small edits can turn a poem into something else. They also show why some people worry about misreading. Scholars have taken different sides on the problem. One group says that every version of Rumi's work, even the ones with missing verses or changed words, still carries the spirit of the master. They argue that the spirit is like a river. Even if a stone falls in, the water still flows toward the same sea. They point to the many ways Rumi's ideas have helped people across time. They quote a line that Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." They say that line still shines, no matter how it is printed. Another group says that any change, even a tiny word, can break the meaning. They compare the poem to a lock and key. The lock is the poem, the key is the exact wording. If the key is altered, it will not fit. They note that Rumi's use of specific images, like the mirror of the heart, is meant to open a precise door in the reader's mind. When a translator turns heart into world, the door changes. The meaning shifts, and the original lesson can be lost. Both sides have good points. The first side reminds us that the love behind the words can travel across time. The second side reminds us that the shape of the words matters. The tension between the two ideas makes the study of Rumi both lively and careful. The mistakes also affect the core themes that have been discussed earlier. The core themes include love as a path, the idea that the self is not separate, and the call to see the divine in everyday life. When a reader thinks the garden is a real garden, the theme of love as an inner garden can be missed. When a speaker quotes a line without context, the theme of seeing the divine in all things can be flattened to a simple saying. The core themes need the full picture to stay bright. To see how a simple mistake can change a thought, imagine a child who sees a pretend sword and thinks it can cut. The child might try to cut a piece of fruit with the wooden stick. The fruit stays whole. The child learns that the stick is not sharp. In the same way, a reader who treats a metaphor as a fact may end up with a shallow view. The deeper truth stays hidden, just like the fruit stays uncut. A second analogy comes from cooking. A recipe may say, add a pinch of salt to bring out the flavor. If a cook thinks the pinch is a literal measurement and adds a whole spoon, the dish becomes too salty. The recipe's purpose was to balance flavors, not to overwhelm. Rumi's verses work like a recipe for the soul. Each word is measured to bring out a balance of love, surrender, and wonder. Changing a word is like adding too much salt. The balance is lost. Real-world use of Rumi's poetry shows both the danger and the hope. In a school, a teacher reads the line about the garden and asks the class to draw a garden inside their hearts. The students create pictures of feelings, not of plants. The teacher kept the metaphor alive. In a corporate meeting, a manager quotes Rumi about the whirl of the dervish to motivate a team. The manager does not explain the dance of surrender. The team hears a fancy line but does not feel the deeper call to let go of ego. The two scenes show how the same line can help or miss depending on how it is used. A famous quote from Rumi that often appears in books is, "What you seek is seeking you." When the quote is printed on a poster, it can look like a simple feel-good slogan. When a teacher explains that the line means that the seeker and the sought are linked, the class can see a deeper idea of unity. The difference is the same as the difference between seeing a picture and seeing the story behind it. Another line that travels a lot is, "The soul has been given its own ears to hear its own music." Some people put the line on a coffee mug and think it means, "Listen to your favorite song." The original line is about the inner voice that guides a person toward truth. When the line is used without that explanation, the inner music is turned into a pop tune. The meaning changes. The modern world adds more ways to mix up the meaning. Social media often cuts a line to fit a caption. A caption may read, "Rumi, the heart is a garden," and then show a picture of a flower bed. The caption suggests a literal garden. The deeper idea that the heart can grow love, patience, and compassion is hidden behind a pretty picture. Some translators try to keep the original meaning. A recent English version by a scholar named Coleman Barks tries to keep the feeling of the Persian while using simple words. He writes, "The garden of your heart is a place where love blooms." He adds a short note that the garden is a picture of the inner self. Readers who see the note are more likely to feel the true meaning. Other translators choose a more poetic style. They might write, "Your heart is a meadow where roses dance." The word meadow changes the picture, and dance adds a new idea. The line still sounds beautiful, but the exact image that Rumi used is altered. The change can lead readers to think of a different scene, and the original lesson about quiet growth may fade. The debate about how much change is allowed continues. Some say that as long as the feeling stays, the poem lives. Others say that the feeling is built on the exact shape of the words. The two sides keep the study of Rumi alive, like a conversation that never ends. When the conversation returns to the core themes, the link becomes clear. The core themes are about love, oneness, and the inner path. If a reader thinks a garden is a real garden, they may miss the idea that love grows inside. If a speaker quotes a line without context, the idea of oneness can be reduced to a catchy phrase. The myths and misinterpretations can hide the real treasure. A final story from history helps to seal the point. In the 14th century, a Sufi master named Haji Bektash visited a market and heard a child recite a line from Rumi about the candle of the heart. The child said it as if it were a story about a candle on a table. Haji Bektash smiled and asked the child, "Do you see the candle inside you?" The child looked puzzled. Haji Bektash explained that the candle is not a thing you can hold. It is the light inside each person. The child began to think about feeling, not about a wax candle. The story shows how a simple question can turn a literal reading into an inner understanding. Another tale comes from a 19th century printing house in Istanbul. The printer found a page where a line about the wine of love was missing. The printer thought the line was a mistake and left it out. Later readers who bought that edition never saw the line about wine. They thought Rumi never spoke of wine. The idea that love can be like wine, intoxicating and sweet, was lost for those readers. The missing line changed the picture of love for a whole generation. These anecdotes remind the listener that each word matters. They also show that the world has many chances to fix a mistake. A teacher can add a note. A translator can compare versions. A reader can ask, "What does this picture mean?" By asking, the reader can move from a literal picture to a deeper view. In the end, the myths about Rumi are like clouds that pass over a bright sun. The sun is the core wisdom. The clouds can hide it for a while, but the light still shines. When the clouds clear, the full brightness returns. The same is true for Rumi's verses. When a reader sees past the literal picture, the inner garden opens, the candle burns, and the heart hears its own music. The next part of the journey will return to the main ideas of love, unity, and the path inward. It will show how the true meaning of Rumi can guide a modern life, if the myths are set aside and the deeper images are let in. The story continues, inviting the listener to look beyond the surface and feel the quiet truth that Rumi left for all who seek. The morning light slips through the window and the day begins with a quiet pause. In that pause, a simple practice can be set up, much like a gardener places a small pot of soil on a windowsill. The gardener knows that each day the plant needs water, sunlight, and gentle care. In the same way, a person can give the mind a little water of thought, a breath of calm, and a seed of kindness. The practice starts with a short breathing exercise. The breath is counted in fours. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. This rhythm is called the box breath. It does not take more than a minute, but it creates a space in the mind where a verse can settle. After the breath, a line from Rumi can be spoken softly. One of his most well-known lines is, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." The line is short, but it holds a gentle reminder that pain can become a source of growth. The speaker can repeat the line, let it echo, and then let the mind settle on the feeling of the words. This short routine can be called a daily watering. Just as a plant drinks water each day, the mind drinks a line of poetry each day. The habit builds a small reservoir of calm that can be drawn upon later. The next part of the routine can be a short reflection. The reflection asks 3 easy questions. First, what does the line mean for you today? Second, what small act of love can you offer to yourself? Third, how can you share a hint of this love with another? The answers do not have to be long. They can be a single phrase or a mental image. The act of answering creates a tiny spark that can grow through the day. In the earlier sections on love and self, the idea that love is a mirror was explored. The mirror reflects the inner light that Rumi often wrote about. When the reflection asks about love, it is asking the mind to turn the mirror toward the heart. When the reflection asks about self, it is asking the mind to notice the breath and the body. The 3 questions tie those earlier ideas together with the new practice. A commuter can try this routine while stuck in traffic. Imagine a driver sitting behind a line of red lights, feeling the heat of the engine and the impatience rising. The driver can turn on the radio, but instead of a song, a short recording of a Rumi verse can be played. The verse, "When you do things from your soul, you feel a river moving in you," can be spoken in a calm voice. As the driver repeats the line, The breath box can be practiced with the foot on the pedal. The breath slows the heart, and the verse reminds the driver that the moment is part of a larger flow. The traffic becomes a place of stillness rather than frustration. The driver can notice the light changing, feel the tension melt, and arrive at the destination with a softer mood. A parent can use the same approach at bedtime. The child is tucked in, the lights are dim, and the parent opens a small book of Rumi verses. The parent reads, "The garden of the world has no limits except in your mind." The child hears the gentle rhythm, and the parent then repeats the short breathing rhythm together. The child learns to count the breaths, to feel the rise and fall of the chest, and to let the verse settle like a soft blanket. The bedtime ritual becomes a moment of shared calm. The child learns that words can be a source of peace, and the parent learns that the same simple practice can be used in many settings. History shows that Rumi's words have been used as more than just poetry. One story tells of a Sufi teacher named Shams al-Din, who lived in the 13th century. He gathered his students in a courtyard and asked each of them to write a line of poetry on the wall of the building. The walls soon filled with verses about love, longing, and the divine. The teacher said that the walls would become a living reminder for anyone who passed by. The simple act of writing a line on a stone turned the space into a place of reflection. The story shows that the practice of placing words in daily life has deep roots. The teacher's method was not about academic study. It was about letting the words become part of the environment, like a scent that lingers in a garden. In modern times, a therapist named Dr. Layla Hassan has incorporated Rumi into her sessions. Dr. Hassan works with clients who feel overwhelmed by stress. She asks each client to choose a short verse that feels true for them. One client chose, "You were born with wings, why prefer to crawl on the ground?" Dr. Hassan then guides the client through a breathing exercise while the verse is spoken slowly. The client reports feeling a shift in perspective, as if the verse opened a small window in a crowded room. Dr. Hassan says that the verses act like gentle prompts that help the mind step back from a problem and see a larger view. Her approach has been shared in professional journals, showing that the old poetry can be a useful tool in modern therapy. Not everyone agrees that poetry can help solve real problems. One critic, a philosopher named Dr. Mark Ellis, argues that verses are pleasant but do not change material conditions. He writes that, "Though a poem may soothe the heart, but it does not feed a hungry child or repair a broken bridge." The critic's point is that practical action is needed, not just comforting words. A second group of critics, often activists, claim that focusing on inner calm can distract people from taking action. They say that when people sit and repeat verses, they may feel less urgency to protest injustice. The concern is that inner work could become an excuse for inaction. These counter-arguments deserve attention. The first critic is right that a poem does not replace food or a roof. The daily watering practice does not aim to build a house. It aims to give the mind a small reserve of calm that can be used when facing hard tasks. When the mind is calm, it can think more clearly about how to act. The second critique warns against complacency. The practice is not meant to replace action, but to support it. A calm mind can choose better strategies, speak more kindly, and persist longer in a cause. The practice can be a tool, not a substitute. To see how the practice can support action, imagine a community garden project. The volunteers gather early in the morning, feeling the weight of the work ahead. Before they start, the leader asks them to take 3 breaths together and to repeat, "The garden of the world has no limits except in your mind." The short pause helps the volunteers feel present, and the verse reminds them that the garden can grow beyond the current plot. The volunteers then work with more focus, planting seedlings, watering, and sharing stories. The simple ritual turned a hard day of labor into a shared experience of meaning. Another example can be found in a classroom. A teacher begins each lesson with a brief breathing exercise and a line from Rumi, such as, "Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder." The students listen, breathe, and then settle into learning. The line reminds them that calm speech can be more powerful than loud shouting. The teacher notices that students become more attentive and less likely to argue. The practice becomes a quiet foundation for a better learning environment. The analogy of watering a plant can be expanded. A plant needs the right amount of water, not too much and not too little. If the water is too much, the roots drown. If it is too little, the plant wilts. In the same way, the mind needs the right amount of poetic reflection. Too much can become a distraction, too little can leave the mind dry. The daily practice suggests a small cup of water each day, enough to keep the soil moist. The verses are the water, the breath is the sunlight, and the reflection questions are the gentle soil that holds everything together. The practical steps can be broken into 3 easy parts. First, set a specific time. Many people find that the first few minutes after waking are ideal. The second part is the breathing box. Count to 4 while inhaling, hold, exhale, and hold again. The third part is the verse. Choose a line that feels true for the day. Speak it out loud, then ask the 3 reflection questions. Finally, close with a short intention, such as, "Why will bring calm to my work," or "Why will share kindness with a stranger." The intention is like a seed that will grow during the day. If a person misses a day, the practice does not break. The next day, the person can simply start again. The habit is forgiving, just like a plant that can survive a short dry spell. The key is consistency over time, not perfection. Over weeks, the mind builds a small reservoir of calm that can be drawn upon during stress, conflict, or fatigue. The earlier discussion on love showed that love is not only a feeling but an action. The verse, "Love is the bridge between you and everything," can be used in the daily practice to turn love into a small act. After the breathing and verse, the person can think of one small act of love for the day, such as offering a smile to a stranger or writing a thank you note. The small act becomes a drop that fills the larger river of love. The earlier discussion on self highlighted that the self is not a fixed thing but a flow. The breathing exercise reminds the self that each breath is a moment of change. The verse, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop," points to the idea that each person holds a whole world inside. The daily practice helps the mind see that the self can expand or contract with attention. To bring the practice into a busy schedule, the commuter example shows that a short pause in traffic can be enough. The parent example shows that bedtime can be a natural moment for the ritual. The garden volunteer example shows that a group can share the practice before work. The classroom example shows that a teacher can embed it in learning. Each setting uses the same 3 steps, adapted to the time and place. The Sufi teacher who wrote verses on walls gave a visual reminder that words can live in the space around us. Modern therapists who play recordings of verses give an auditory reminder. Both show that the medium can change, but the core idea stays the same. A simple line can become a point of focus, a source of calm, and a seed for action. The critics who say poetry cannot solve real problems raise a valid point. Poetry alone does not fix broken systems. Yet the practice does not claim to replace policy or engineering. It claims to give the mind a small tool to stay present, to reduce reactivity, and to open space for thoughtful action. When a person feels less reactive, they can listen better, negotiate more fairly, and work longer without burning out. In that sense, the practice supports real change. The critics who argue that poetry distracts from action also raise a concern. If a person spends all day reading verses, they may avoid work. The practice counters this by limiting the time to a few minutes and by pairing the verse with an intention to act. The intention can be as simple as "I will be kind in my meeting" or "I will finish my report." The verse fuels the intention, not replaces it. In summary, the daily watering of the mind with a breath, a verse, and a brief reflection can become a habit that fits into many parts of life. The commuter can calm the rush hour, the parent can end the day with peace, the gardener can start a community project with focus, the teacher can create a calm classroom, and the therapist can help clients find a quiet place inside. The historical anecdotes of the Sufi teacher and the modern therapist show that the idea has been useful for centuries. The counter-arguments remind that the practice must be balanced with real work, but they also highlight that a calm mind can be a stronger tool for action than a frantic one. The final step is Rumi's name now appears on billboards in big cities. A bright board in a downtown square shows a short line in Persian script and English. "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Passers-by stop, read, and sometimes take a photo. The image spreads on phones and later on feeds. The simple act of seeing a quote on a billboard turns a street into a quiet place for thought. The scene shows how a poet from the 13th century can sit beside a modern train, still speaking to a crowd that never met him. In a small coffee shop on a quiet street, a ceramic mug rests on a table. The mug bears the words, "Let the heart be your compass, not the map." The line comes from a Rumi poem about love and direction. A customer lifts the mug, reads the line, and feels a small lift in mood. The mug becomes more than a container. It is a reminder that the old poem can sit beside a modern latte. The image of the mug is often shared on social media, where friends comment, "I need this today." In that way, a single line of poetry moves from a book page to a daily routine. On a bright screen, a TikTok video plays. A young creator stands in a garden, the sun low behind a wall of vines. The creator reads a short verse. "You were born with wings, why prefer to crawl?" The voice is calm, the background soft. The video loops, and a caption invites viewers to repeat the line. The clip gathers thousands of likes, and comments appear in many languages. Some write, "Rumi speaks to my heart," while others add, "My grandma taught me this." The short video shows how a verse can travel across continents in seconds, reaching people who may never have opened a book of poetry. Movies also carry Rumi's spirit. In a recent drama set in a desert town, a character keeps a small notebook of poems. The notebook is opened during a moment of grief, and a line about the garden of lovers is read aloud. The scene is quiet, the camera lingers on the words, and the audience feels the weight of the verse. In another film about a modern dancer, a choreographer uses a Rumi poem as the theme for a performance. The dancer moves with a fluid grace that seems to echo the line, "When you let go of who you are, you become who you might be." The film's credits list Rumi as an inspiration, showing that his words can shape visual storytelling as well as spoken word. Books continue to carry his voice. A bestseller from the past year, titled Rumi, The Heart's Whisper, collects over 200 poems, each with a short note that explains the cultural background. The book has sold millions of copies worldwide and appears on many bestseller lists. Its success shows that readers still crave the simple, deep messages that Rumi offered. A review in a major newspaper praised the book, saying, "Rumi's words feel like a gentle hand on a restless mind." The book's cover shows a stylized swirl of ink, a nod to the calligraphy of his original manuscripts. Art galleries now hold exhibitions titled Rumi in Color. One wall is covered with a large painting that mixes bright blues and golds, while a line from Rumi runs across the bottom in bold script. Visitors stand before the canvas, read the line, and then step back to view the swirl of color. The painting invites each person to feel the poem as a visual pulse. In a different gallery, A sculptor has created a series of metal hearts, each engraved with a short Rumi line. The metal catches the light, and the words seem to glow. These works show how visual artists translate Rumi's ideas into shapes that can be touched. The internet has turned Rumi into a meme. A picture of a cat curled in a sunbeam is paired with a Rumi quote about the sun and the heart. The post spreads, and people add their own captions. The meme format makes the poem feel light, but the core idea remains the same. Love is a source of warmth. Some critics say that turning a poet into a meme cheapens the original meaning. They argue that the depth of Rumi's spiritual teaching gets lost when it is reduced to a quick laugh. Others reply that the meme brings the poem to people who would never read a full collection. By sharing a short line, the meme may spark a desire to learn more. One counterargument focuses on the risk of overuse. A scholar wrote, "When a line is repeated on mugs, shirts, and phone screens, it can become a decorative slogan, not a call to inner work." The scholar worries that the line may lose its power, that people may read it without feeling the deeper call to change. The scholar points to a study where participants who saw a Rumi quote on a product reported feeling nice, but did not change any habits. The argument is that popularity can turn a profound teaching into a marketing tool. A second counterargument pushes back. A cultural commentator notes, "The spread of Rumi's words across platforms means more people hear a message of love and unity." The commentator argues that even a small spark can grow into a larger fire of curiosity. In a survey of TikTok users, many said they looked up the full poem after hearing a short verse. Some said they bought a book, joined a reading group, or even started a meditation practice. The commentator sees the wide reach as a net that catches many souls, even if some only skim the surface. Historical anecdotes show how Rumi first entered modern pop culture. In the 1950s and 60s, a group of American poets called the Beat Generation discovered his work. Allen Ginsberg, a leading figure, quoted Rumi in a public reading in San Francisco. Ginsberg said, "Rumi's love is the same fire that burns in our city streets." The Beat poets printed his verses in small chapbooks that were passed hand to hand. Their enthusiasm helped bring Rumi into the English-speaking world. The Beat movement valued spontaneity and spiritual searching, and Rumi's mystic tone fit their needs. The anecdote shows how a group of poets acted as a bridge, moving Rumi from Persian courts to coffee houses in New York. Another recent anecdote involves a bestseller that compiled Rumi's poems. The book, released in 2022, was edited by a well-known literary figure who spent years translating the original Persian verses. The launch event was held in a large bookstore, and a line from the book was projected onto the building's glass. "The garden of the heart is always in bloom." The event attracted musicians, dancers, and even a chef who created a dish inspired by the poem. The book's success led to a series of podcasts, each episode exploring a different poem with modern commentary. The anecdote shows how a single publication can spark a wave of creative projects across many fields. Everyday life now carries Rumi's voice in small ways. A person may wear a bracelet with the word love in Persian script, a subtle nod to the poet's focus on love as a universal force. A teacher may write a Rumi line on a whiteboard before a lesson, using it as a calm start to the day. A commuter may see a subway poster with a short verse about patience, and the words may soften the rush of the crowd. These moments illustrate how the poet's ideas have become part of daily routines, not just academic study. The influence of Rumi also appears in digital art. A graphic designer creates a series of Instagram posts where each image shows a modern city skyline overlaid with a translucent calligraphic verse. The contrast between steel and stone and the soft curve of the script creates a visual tension that mirrors the poem's theme of inner and outer worlds. Followers comment, It feels like the city is breathing with the poem. The designer says the goal is to remind people that even in a fast-moving world, a quiet line can bring a pause. In the world of fashion, a popular brand released a limited edition t-shirt that printed a short Rumi line across the chest. The shirt sold out within hours, and the brand reported that many buyers said the shirt felt like a personal mantra. The brand later donated a portion of the proceeds to a charity that supports literacy programs, linking the sale back to the poet's love of learning. The episode shows how a commercial product can carry a deeper purpose when the message aligns with the brand's values. Music also borrows from Rumi. A contemporary singer released an album where each track is based on a different poem. The singer's voice carries a soft, breathy tone that matches the gentle rhythm of the verses. One song repeats the line, "When you are with everyone, you are no one," and the melody builds slowly, inviting the listener to sit with the paradox. Fans of the album often share the song on streaming platforms, adding personal reflections in the comments. The music becomes a new way to hear Rumi's thoughts, wrapped in modern sound. The spread of Rumi's words is not limited to the West. In Tehran, a mural on a school wall displays a large calligraphic quote, "The garden of the heart is always in bloom." The mural was painted by a group of students who wanted to bring a message of hope to their community. The school reports that the mural has become a gathering spot for quiet reflection during recess. The example shows that the poet's ideas travel both outward and inward, crossing cultural and language barriers. Social media platforms host countless accounts that post Rumi verses daily. One account has over 1 million followers and pairs each quote with a simple photograph of nature: a sunrise, a river, a leaf. The account's creator says the goal is to share a moment of peace. Followers often reply, "Why needed this today?" indicating that the short, gentle lines can act like a mental breath. The account's reach illustrates how technology can amplify a centuries-old voice. Even in advertising, Rumi appears. A travel company used the line, "Travel not to escape life, but so life does not escape you," in a campaign for a mountain retreat. The ad shows a lone traveler standing on a ridge, looking out over clouds. The phrase invites viewers to think about presence and experience, echoing the poet's emphasis on living fully in the moment. Critics of the ad argue that the line is being used to sell a product, but supporters claim it spreads a valuable reminder about mindfulness. The question remains, does the mass use of Rumi's words help or hurt his original teaching? Those who say it cheapens the message point to the risk of turning deep spiritual advice into a decorative element. They note that a line on a mug may be seen, but the heart may not be moved. They warn that the true work of Rumi is inner change, not a photo for Instagram. Those who argue the opposite say that each new appearance is a seed. A person who sees a line on a billboard may feel a spark, then look up the full poem later. A TikTok viewer may be drawn to the rhythm of the verse, then explore more of the poet's work. The spread creates a network of curiosity that can lead to deeper study. In this view, popularity is not a dilution but a doorway. The modern presence of Rumi ties back to the earlier discussion of his influence on culture. From the beat poets who first brought his words to the West to today's digital platforms, the path shows a steady widening of reach. Each new medium adds a layer of interpretation, yet the core idea stays the same: love, unity, and inner growth. The story of Rumi's legacy in modern culture is a story of a single voice that keeps finding new ears. When a child sees a Rumi quote on a classroom wall, the child may ask, "What does this mean?" The teacher can answer with a short story, and the child may remember the line for years. When an adult buys a coffee mug with a heart line, the adult may pause before a stressful meeting and feel a brief calm. When a teenager watches a TikTok of a verse, The teen may feel less alone in a moment of doubt. These everyday moments add up, creating a quiet ripple that spreads through society. In the end, the spread of Rumi's words shows how a poet can become part of daily life. The billboard, the mug, the TikTok, the book, the painting, the song, the mural, the ad, all are different ways that his voice reaches people. Some will argue that the message loses depth when it is used for profit or decoration. Others will point to the many hearts that open a little because of a simple line. The balance between these views will keep the conversation alive, just as Rumi's own verses ask the reader to hold both light and shadow. The next part of the series will look at how